Commissioner and the President for the Board of Elections for the year 2014. With the Commissioners meeting to my left, please announce their presence for the record.
Good afternoon. Ron Castorina, Richmond County Republican. Behind the wall here.
Michael Rendino, Bronx County Republican.
Simon Shamoon, Kings Republican.
Frederick Humane, Manhattan Republican.
Michael Michelle, Queens Republican.
Julie Dent, Brooklyn Democrat. Welcome, everyone.
Jose Roger, Queens Democrat.
Executive staff, please.
Michael Ryan, Executive Director.
Pamela Perkins, Administrative Manager.
Larry Vasquez, Director of Communications. Nina M. Crispino, Director of Personnel.
Okay. First item on the agenda is the minutes of March 14, 2014. Has everybody had a chance to review them? Where is it? I'm sorry, March 4th. Has everybody had a chance to review them?
So moved, Mr. President.
I have to abstain as I was not present.
Okay.
Me too. Do we have enough?
Yeah, we have 6.
Okay.
I'll second it. All in favor say aye. Any opposed or abstain?
Abstain
Okay.
respectfully.
2 abstentions from Commissioner Rajo and Commissioner Humane. The second on the agenda is Michael J. Ryan. Update on voter cards.
Yes, last week there was some discussion with respect to the potential discontinuance of the use of voter cards, or whether we're going to continue to use them. Commissioner Guastella made a motion and then withdrew the motion. In any event, Commissioner Guastella is not here. However, the commissioners did instruct us to come back with further discussion regarding the voter cards. To recap a little bit from last week, we have some prototypes of potential privacy sleeves that can be used. And again, they have the instructions on the inside. Clearly, these would be items that would be presented to the commissioners at a later date for vote as to exactly what language we should include on them. These would serve more than just a function of quote-unquote ballot security. They would provide for more voter privacy. As we had discussed last week, the privacy sleeves that we use presently are simply manila folders. They might also be vanilla. I haven't tasted one, but they do not cover the entire ballot, especially when we use the 19-inch ballots. These would clearly be long enough to accommodate any ballot that we might have. So it's a voter privacy issue, as well as if we put the instructions on the inside, it would eliminate. And we did a very quick analysis of the potential man hours of savings, about 1,500 man hours in setting up the privacy booths, as the instructions would no longer be required to be included in the privacy booths. With respect to how they could help to replace the voter cards, clearly if someone is coming to the scanner with an item this substantial in their hand, that would be the gateway or the ticket to the scanner that others were concerned about. And there's numerous other issues. There is the cost of the production of the voter cards. There is, at least from executive management's perspective, as a recommendation, I understand and I appreciate Commissioner Sumis's indications last week that they provide a measure of security. But when you consider how the voter cards are processed, essentially a 4-way division of a standard 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, I don't know that the level of security is quite what everyone might think it would be, since that would be an easily reproduced item for distribution on election day. And it still begs the question, how do you get to the scanner without a ballot? So it ultimately comes down to what we think is an ultimate inability to reproduce the ballots. Now, we can have other discussions, I think, separate and apart from the use of the voter cards, about ways that we can improve who gets a ballot and ways we can do that within the law. A couple of things that we've talked about is working with the vendor to put the person's actual age adjacent to their name, perhaps in a larger font, and that might not be able to be done under the current contract, but it could certainly, we're in the process of coming up with new specs because that contract to produce the poll books is nearing its expiration. So there's things that we can do to speed up the process, but also to enhance the security. And quite frankly, it is the considered opinion of executive management that the voter cards were a necessary tool when we used lever machines, and we had to, in primaries, when we had to set a party affiliation. But now that we're not there anymore, and we've moved on to a different way of doing business, it seems clear that, at least from executive management's perspective, that we have to fully adapt to the technology, and the ballot is the security. This would certainly, something along these lines would certainly contribute to a voter's feeling that nobody's viewing their ballot, so we'd have the voter privacy issues would be somewhat addressed by this, and obviously we have to go through some retraining with respect to making sure that poll workers are not too zealous when somebody appears to be having some difficulty at the machine. And I don't know what other security issues the cards are felt to give, but I certainly am prepared to answer any questions or to go any further. Sure.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Have we priced out what the cost of a 19-inch privacy sleeve with printing on 4 sides would be, and compared that to the cost of the cards, which somebody quoted $31,000 citywide for an election, and what the difference would be from a regular vanilla envelope to one that's 19 inches with extensive printing to one that just had the board logo on it? Have we looked at that at all?
Those costs have not been priced out, but it's more than just the straight up cost comparison, because there is also approximately, and we're being conservative when we estimated this, approximately 1,500 man hours that would be saved per election cycle if we went with a privacy sleeve that was reusable, as opposed to what we do now, which is simply discard the folder. So we have not made that analysis, as broad, and perhaps had you not been sunning yourself in Aruba last week and asked that question, it would have been something that we could have addressed this week. But I certainly don't begrudge you your vacation, and I'm kidding.
Sure sounds like
Boy, if it walks like a duck, it walks like a duck.
No, but in all candor, it's more than just the printing costs. And again, these privacy booths take quite a bit of setup, and often what happens is, although they're supposed to be set up and returned the same way, the instructions are removed, and we end up having to set the machines up every single election cycle. And clearly, with these being more substantial and having the printing on them, it would be our expectation that the vast majority of them would be reused over multiple election cycles.
Well, I don't know why or what the expectation is that the current ones weren't being reused, because they're supposed to come back, and they can be. They're just regular folders, which are relatively cheap and are of the type that a routine stationery store or some of the super stationery stores might have. So, I mean, I think to a large extent it addresses a lot of my concerns, because I was the #1 proponent of the security concerns. Obviously, the more we put on it, the harder it would be for somebody to duplicate. In my view, it's very easy currently to duplicate the ballot, and my main concern and overarching concern on all of this is that somebody goes, signs in, and instead of walking directly to the scanner line after they've signed in, is in a crowded polling site. They go out, they go to an office and make 100, 1,000, however many ballots, and then have people come back into the polling place and go stand online at the scanner line because there's no other security for that, and then they just go and they vote the ballots in the machine, and things happen. That's my main concern. So if we had something that was sufficiently difficult to copy and not let anybody vote who didn't have the right privacy sleeve, then maybe that would suffice for my concerns for security. The fact that it cost $31,000 to print up the cards didn't seem to me to be a lot of money for a lot of extra security.
Right.
So if cost is a basis for changing it, then I would just want to make sure that we would compare apples to apples to make sure that we're not actually increasing the cost. Now, I agree that 15,000 man-hours or person hours, I wouldn't want to just make this.
1,500.
I'm sorry,
You want to raise it to 15,000?
No, I don't know.
Strengthen the argument.
1,500 person hours, as opposed to, we don't want to be sexist here either. Would certainly add significantly to the cost, and I understand that. However, they still would need to do certain things on the privacy booth, so I'm not sure that the total time would necessarily be eliminated by the fact that they still have to put the pens on there and the lights and the magnifiers. So the cost of just putting a couple of pieces of tape and a piece of paper, I don't know how much actual savings there is. But, we ought to look at it, and if we can save time, effort, and money, I think, we certainly should do that.
But in terms of, just 1 second, just to answer Commissioner Humane's question with respect to the cost. It was roughly about a little over 30,000 for this election with respect to voter cards. However, that was the cost that we paid to the outside vendor. That did not include the number of cards that we produced in-house, which was roughly, I think it was over 800,000 that we produced in-house. And we did not, because it was an in-house expense, it wasn't something that we calculated out separately. So that $30,000 number is clearly more than that. That was
What
what we spent.
security measures did you use when you were replicating them in-house, I believe?
When we replicated them in-house in order to get them done for the last election and to save costs, essentially what we did was we took an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock and cut it in quarters.
So they'd be easy to replicate, just as easy as the ballots.
Well, I guess depends, if you have access to a high-speed printer, the first night that we, when we knew that we were going to be continuing to use the voter cards and we really wanted to drive the cost down, I authorized some overtime to do a test run, and from about 5 o'clock at night till 11 o'clock at night, they produced about 150,000.
My question is, you're saying approximately 1,500 man-hours. That's per election, am I correct?
Correct.
So it could be 3 elections, 4,500 hours,
Correct.
even if you cut it
If
in
it's
half.
if they're citywide.
If it's citywide.
Right, comparing apples to apples, we're talking about a citywide election.
And most of our ballots are 17 inches long.
14, 17, or 19. But most of them are-
14 is
most
a
of them are
common
no
size
longer-
you can
right.
buy in a store, but
Right.
17 and 19, you
Yeah.
have to order it.
Correct. And again, not to quote-unquote pick on Queens, the only place we really use the 19-inch ballot is in Queens.
Did you have to bring that up?
Is Queens also the jewel of the city?
That's right.
Oh, you missed it last week. I explained that. It's one of the side jewels in the ring of the city, with Staten Island still maintaining center spot as the jewel of the city.
President Summers, I have a few questions, please.
Thank goodness. Good.
And it's directed to our Executive Director, Ryan. With the sleeve that you just showed to us, will it have any type of pocket, or it will just, actually the ballot will just fit inside?
Well, I think that those questions, these were just quick prototypes that we had made up, and certainly those are discussions that once, if we come to an agreement that we're gonna do this, we can certainly, discuss whether or not there's any pockets necessary, or what printing we're gonna put on it, how we're gonna do it, but clearly, these look a lot more official than what we're using presently.
I agree, and number two, if we vote on this today, when will it go into effect?
Well, that also, I think, is subject to some discussion. I would say, to be on the safe side, that we would say definitely for the general election in November, because again, some of the training concerns that were raised prior to election day in November will still be in place because our next training cycle does not commence until July. So if those training issues were legitimate when they were raised, and I believe they were, that it would not make sense for us to bring people back in to retrain them and incur the expense of a retraining prior to the time when, especially when they're due to come in, a month later after the June primary. So I would say incorporate it into the training for the upcoming elections after June, and usually we could commit to the primary, but occasionally, sometimes the training goes a little bit beyond that, the training cycle. But we should be able to do it for the primary in September, but certainly for the general in November.
And one last question. Is there any type of advertisement that we can put out so we can let the voters know that this change is coming down the line? I do know that some of the voters are concerned that they find out about some of these things the day of election when they go into the poll sites to vote. In addition to that, I think it's more than training the poll workers or the coordinators. I think we need to get more information out there to the public.
Well, clearly, we have our legal notices. It can be included in our notices to the public. We have our voter information guide that's going to have to be printed. We also have our website, and we're constantly looking at new ways and new partnerships with folks to drive people to our website. One of the things that we learned from the presidential commission report is that, unfortunately, most people, whether it's elections or otherwise, don't go to government websites for their information, and they're often driven on the web to other spots. And I hesitate to mention different search engines, but we all know what they are, and the different search engines often take the lead on these things. And the Presidential Commission report encouraged partnering with various search engines to get the information out to the general public in a better way than we're doing it presently. Although I will say, in defense of our website, if anybody visits it, there is a wealth of information on it.
There really is.
There really is a lot, and we're ahead of the curve on that. We don't, sometimes we don't do our own best advertising, but we really are ahead on the curve on that when you compare us to a lot of other jurisdictions in terms of what's available. The problem is people aren't visiting the website in quite the numbers that we would like, so that they make sure that they're as educated as possible.
That sounds like a discussion that the
Thank
Voter
you.
Outreach Committee should delve into.
Yes.
And who are the members?
We're having a meeting on Friday.
Okay.
We have a meeting scheduled for Friday.
Commissioner Emanuel.
Yeah, I just wondered whether anybody had also given thought to, beyond the ballot security reasons and the sign-in reasons for having the cards, and what they've been used for sort of post-election, and whether or not the additional fact that we would know who voted and who didn't vote might be brought up in litigations, and the fact that voter cards with voter names on them is a backup to the sign-in book to see who possibly could have voted and who theoretically was voting, et cetera, et cetera. And I just, that's another aspect of this to sometimes resolve discrepancies in the, litigation that sometimes ensues after close elections. And while that's not my primary concern, it is a concern that we should also understand that if we decide to get away from them, that might have an effect on some of the subsequent litigation.
Right. Well, I had a conversation, seeing as this, out of the 62 counties in New York, only 5 use them. I had a conversation with the State Board of Elections regarding this issue, and the position that I got from the State Board and what they've told other counties, which led to, ultimately the discontinuance of the use of them, is that in terms of the post-election litigation, we are, as a board, assuming a responsibility and an obligation that is not otherwise ours. So in terms of some third party's ability to make their case, they have to make their case ultimately with the evidence that's available to them. We're not under an obligation to make all evidence under the universe available to them. They'll have to make their case with whatever is available at that time. That's one issue. And then there's another issue with the Bronx, and I would be happy to have the Bronx staff come back and talk to the commissioners about what they used, how they used the machines. I am not technically up to speed on how it's done, but there is some of the things that we use the voter cards for post-election can be handled by generating certain post-election reports from the machines. And the Bronx had an occasion to do that a couple of years ago. Right. Right. So there's, I think ultimately we are where we are at this point in time, and as we've said in the past, these machines were not the DS200s, and I think, Commissioner Humane, you have eloquently over the course of time indicated your position with respect to the DS200s and how they weren't something that we went out and sought, and perhaps if the Board of Elections was left completely to its own devices, this wouldn't be the way it is. But we are here where we're at now, and quite frankly, under these circumstances, I think the voter cards are ultimately anachronistic.
It's awfully progressive of you.
We're here where we're at.
We're here.
Where we're at?
We are at this moment in time.
If the nuns were here right now.
Sister Elisa, I'm sorry.
Well, you should be.
Speaking about ballot security and voter security, voting security, this may have been a discussion that had occurred prior to my appointment. Has there been any discussion about the security of the ballot itself and what the cost would be if it was enhanced to the point where it can't be photocopied?
There has been some discussion. I don't know what the cost is, but there are security measures that could be put in place. There are some there now which, quite frankly, are not advertised for obvious reasons, because they're security measures. But there are other things, like I know that there's a special ink mark that could be placed, or watermark that could be placed on the ballot, which would come with an additional cost. And certainly, if those concerns are raised by the commissioners, we can explore that. But there are other things that we can do in terms of ballot security that we're not doing right this minute.
Such as?
Watermark, a special ink that could be put onto the ballot that's only done by that can't be copied, that would prevent copying.
I'm not so sure that it can't be copied is a good idea, and I think to Bridgeport a few years ago when they under-ordered ballots, and I think back to the presidential election last year when some governors said that anybody on the way to the LIRR could vote wherever they damn well pleased. And we kind of ran out of ballots then too. So I'm not sure the inability to photocopy is necessarily a good thing. And I cite those two precedents as my reasons why. Commissioner Castrian.
I can echo the sentiment of the executive director with respect to the post-election concerns. While I was up in Albany for the state commissioners meeting in January, I had various meetings with some personnel up there. And what they essentially told me was, well, that's what you have the books for. People sign in the books, and that's what we use them for. Out of all the counties of the state of New York, there were very few that used these voter cards, and they seem to get along very well. I just want to make a point about the methodology by which we determine the cost savings here. Just kind of off the top of my head here, I guess we would take the current costs. We would have to deduct the labor cost, as you said, 1,500 hours worth of labor time, deduct the cost of production of the voter cards, deduct the cost of the pre-existing manila folders, also deduct the cost of storage of the voter cards, because we're currently also storing them into perpetuity. And the only addition would essentially be the cost of production of the new sleeve with the instructions. Would that be the correct statement, Executive Director?
That sounds like a comprehensive list. As I said, we did not delve into that in its entirety, but certainly as the process moved forward, once we were gonna do it, yes, then we would, as a part of our budget testing.
So therefore, we essentially accomplish two goals, and the two goals are A, security, and B, cost savings.
Yeah. You know, try not to elaborate when I agree.
Commissioner Michelle.
At this time, unless anybody, I'd like to make a motion to do away with the voter cards.
I second that.
Commissioner May?
Yeah, I think it's premature to make the motion until we have what the suitable alternative is gonna be. And now we're voting to do it. I would rather see a vote saying that we should come out and get the calculation that you just spoke about, so that we know we're actually saving money and not increasing the cost, if that's one of the reasons for doing it. But what we're doing is essentially a pig in a poke. We don't know what the substitution is gonna be yet. So we could say that we would like to get rid of them if there's an appropriate substitute, but we don't know what it is yet. And I just think that without knowing what we're replacing them with, it's premature to throw them out with the dishwater, but that's, you know.
I love when Republicans can't agree. Well, premature or otherwise, the motion was made and seconded.
Yeah.
So,
Is there a date by you want them, by the general election, say? And if sooner,
Yeah.
if they figure?
Well, the way I look at it is, just to put a frame around it, any change in procedures is gonna have to come back before the commissioners for approval. So, I look at this as a first step in developing the procedures, and then we'll come back, and if there's any things that we've missed as executive management, I'm certain that the commissioners will, in their wisdom, tell us where they think we have been incomplete, and we'll
And I
make the
believe
appropriate
if,
remedy.
and I believe if the cost, if they come back with an over cost or something like that, we can make another motion to stop it.
Absolutely.
But I think we should go forward with it and see how, the outcome of it.
I think that security is very important. Cost on, and I hate to talk about cost and thousands of dollars as not a lot of money, but when you're talking about the actual act of voting, forget what we do all year to prepare for the, you know, when we actually talk about the act of voting by the voter, then I think cost in keeping the integrity of the system should be, you know, a secondary or tertiary argument or consideration. Voter cards have been around a long time. I think the security argument, I don't think they provide security. I think they provide other things in terms of backup and other sorts of feel-good measures. But at the end of the day, I think they are obsolete. And for God's sakes, everything in New York City has gotten so complicated. It'd be refreshing if you can go into a poll site, sign your name, and fill out a ballot and vote. We've already complicated the systems as it is with the new machines and the new procedures. So I'm inclined to support the repeal of the use of voter cards.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or against? I'm voting against for the reasons I stated last week. Commissioner May?
Against.
It's 2 against, 6 for, 2 against. The motion carries. The last item on the agenda is executive session for litigation. I move that we go into executive session. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. If anybody's not here when we come back, next Tuesday at 1:30. Okay, we are back.
Sherelle Towns, a Bronx Democrat for over 12 years, is having surgery. I'm asking to grant her 45 hours of discretionary advance of time.
Is that in accordance with all appropriate rules and regulations?
It is. I have all documentation.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Motion carries unanimously. Oh, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Commissioner Dent. Who else we missing?
We have 6. Commissioner Michelle.
Yeah, but when I said carries unanimously, it wasn't accurate in the absence of those two. I guess we'll have to wait.
Or Commissioner, we're going to record 6 in favor.
No, we have 7.
Or you could just sit there and wait.
Are you in favor of?
Sherelle Towns, advance of time.
Yeah, so, and Commissioner Dent?
I'm favor of.
Okay, so it's unanimous.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So it's unanimous.
It's unanimous. Move to adjourn?
Second.
We are adjourned. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned until next Tuesday at 1:30.